of them got elected. None of them got elected, and it was very frustrating. And she thought maybe if we could collaborate and all of the rural communities in Illinois could figure things out, then maybe it would work better, and also at least give everyone a lot of emotional support. Anyway, so tonight we are going to have a panel on how rural communities benefit by helping immigrants and refugees. And before we do this panel, one thing we would like to do is we'd like to show a really short poem video. Let me see if, and now, okay, I have to remember to share my screen here. Just a second, share screen.
And then you have to enable the sound.
Oh yeah, that I almost didn't do that before. Okay, so here we go. This is a really cool video.
Home. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than bloody in their throats. And the boy you went to school with who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factories holding his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly, and even then you carry the anthem under your breath, only tearing up your passport in airport toilets, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear that you would not be going back. You have to understand, and no one would put their children in a boat unless the sea is safer than the land. No one burns their palms under trains, beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the gallbladder of a truck feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled means something more than journey. No one crawls under fences, wants to be beaten, wants to be pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches where your body is left aching, or prison because prison is safer than a city of fire, and one prison guard in the night is safer than 14 men who look like your father. No one could take it, could stomach it. No one's skin would be tough enough. The go home blacks, refugees, dirty immigrants, asylum seekers, sucking our country dry, niggers with their hands out. They smell strange, savage, messed up their own country, and now they want to mess up ours. How do the words, the dirty looks, roll off your back? And maybe it's because the blow is softer than a limb torn off, or the words are more tender than 14 men between your legs, or the insults are easier to swallow than rubble, than bone, than your child's body in pieces. I want to go home. But home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun. And no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore, unless home told you to quicken your legs. Leave your clothes behind. Crawl through the desert. Wade through the oceans. Drown, save, be hungry, beg, forget pride. Your survival is more important. No one leaves home unless home is a sweaty voice in your ear saying, leave. Run away from me now. I don't know what I've become, but I know that anywhere is safer than here.
Home is an 8-stanza poem by Warsan Shire, a London-based Somali writer, poet, editor, and teacher. She uses literary devices such as metonymy, personification, metaphor, anaphora, and enjambment in her poem.
Can stop screen
sharing. The poem has no rhyme scheme or set meter. Shire's purpose in writing.
Okay.
You.
Sorry.
There's a very powerful piece, and it's a little difficult to transition from that, but we wanted to share it because we thought that it would set the tone for thinking about some of our people who are coming to our country and opening our hearts to some empathy. So in our rural group, we have talked at length about the negative impact of population loss in some rural Illinois communities, that negative impact on schools, on healthcare, on the housing stock. But at the same time, there are people coming to live in the United States who need to find a new, secure, welcoming community. Finding a way to welcome new Americans to rural Illinois could be a win-win if we can convince people of the truth. When communities welcome new Americans, the community usually benefits by increased diversity, entrepreneurship, and by the energy that immigrants and refugees often share. In my career as a teacher of elementary English as a second language to children from all over the world, our English-speaking children loved welcoming our new students. They loved learning about the history and culture of the countries of their new friends. They learned more about history and culture from them than they did in their social studies book, believe me. They loved their Japanese bento boxes. They loved learning how to really play soccer. They loved learning new words from a child their own age. In other words, everyone benefited by welcoming our new English language learners. So that's the point of tonight's event. Rural communities benefit if they welcome immigrants and refugees. And we're going to hear that story tonight from 3 perspectives, and then we'll open up for questions. So please put your questions in the chat and we'll be watching for your questions. And if your question is directed at one of our 3 wonderful speakers, please indicate that as well. And I'm going to introduce our speakers one at a time so we can hear from each of them individually, and then we'll start the question and answer period. So we're going to begin with my good friend, Sara Dady. Sara is the owner of Dady Law Group in Rockford, where she specializes in immigration law and is a remarkable advocate for immigrants and refugees. In 2018, she defeated 3 very strong candidates for the primary election in the 16th Congressional District, but unfortunately, she lost in the general to Adam Kinzinger, even though she received more Democratic votes than any Democrat has ever received in the 16th Congressional District. And I also recommend, I hope this is okay, Sara, I also recommend that you friend Sara on Facebook, because she regularly posts wonderfully informative pieces about the truth about immigrants and the truth about immigration. So you'll learn a lot if you friend her. She doesn't just gripe, she educates. So I'm going to turn it over to Sara Dady. Sara, it's so wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you, Sara. It's wonderful to see you and everyone else. And I will point out that even though I lost the election in 2018, we did win Reagan's hometown.
Yes, we did.
And I give great credit to Sara and her awesome group for that. Nothing beats knocking doors and talking to people face to face. That is the best way, and I think the only way for Democrats in rural America to win elections. You got to do the legwork. You got to put in the face time. Yeah. As Sara said, I've been practicing immigration law for a long time. And I'm really, really frustrated with our country and Congress that we have failed to pass reforms and fix what is clearly a broken system. It's a system that is not working for us. It's not working for our economic interests. It is not working in our humanitarian interests. And it certainly is not working for people who need us to work. So that's really frustrating to me. And it was very nice of Sara to say my Facebook posts are informative rather than inflammatory. I think that I'm getting more inflammatory the older that I get and the more impatient I get. But there are a couple of things I want you to think about during this discussion tonight. The 2021 census came out, and it clearly shows that the US birth rates are declining and our mortality rates are increasing. And if that trend continues, by 2060, the US population growth will decline. Right now, we're seeing our slowest growth ever. In prior years, we had about 1 million immigrants coming to the US every year. In 2021, it was just over 200,000. So the decline in immigration means a decline in US population. And that's a bad thing because we're the world's largest economy. We have to keep growing. We need more people coming in. We have a lot of Americans who are going to be retiring soon, and we need more workers paying into Social Security and creating more jobs. That's what has made America successful. And it's immigration that's really made us successful. So we need to honor that, but always keep in mind, we have to keep in the long view on immigration, which is something Congress and one party in particular does not do at any time. There are 3 bills I want to bring to your attention. The Farm Workforce Modernization Act of 2021, that would create a real, make some fixes to the agricultural worker visa program, the H-2A program, which is not a great program, as any farmer will tell you. It's bureaucratic. The processing time is long, the visa numbers are limited, and oftentimes by the time workers are hired and issued their visas to come into the United States, harvest season is over or planting season is over. So it's worthless to them. We have millions of undocumented people in our country. Half of all agricultural workers are undocumented. So what this bill does is it provides them a path to apply for legal status. Now, this bill has passed the House and it's on its way to the Senate. Its first stop will be the Senate Judiciary Committee, and our very own Senator Durbin is chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. This bill passed the House with 13 Republican votes.
Wow.
And I've not seen that in a long time. If we could get 13 Republicans in the Senate, this is one decent bill that could pass, but who knows? So I want to bring that to your attention. And certainly I would encourage you to call Senator Durbin and voice your support. And I have no doubt that he is supportive of this bill. It does some bad things, which I understand. That's probably one of the reasons they got 13 Republican votes, is it creates more grounds of disqualification for people who would otherwise qualify for legal status, particularly around criminal convictions. That's always popular with Republicans, but if the idea is we want to legalize people and know who is here, we should make it harder for them to remain undocumented than it is to become documented. The other bill that passed, as it has been introduced for the last 20 years, is the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act has passed the House, and that would allow people who have DACA now to apply for a green card, real permanent residency. And they desperately, desperately need that. We need it in Illinois. We have well over 100,000 DACAs in the state of Illinois, working in healthcare, working in ag, working in sciences, working in food processing, and they have absolutely no way to apply for real legal status. So that's on its way to the Senate. The DREAM Act in the House received 0 Republican votes, 0. It was passed solely on party lines. I'm not hopeful we're going to be able to find 10 Republicans in the Senate to get it past a filibuster. Senator Durbin sponsors the DREAM Act in the Senate every legislative session. And then the last bill, which does a little bit with immigration, is the MORE Act. And that is the act that would remove cannabis as a Schedule II drug on the federal level, legalizing cannabis federally. Written into that bill, because right now under immigration laws, people who are convicted of possession of marijuana are disqualified from getting a green card. There's a waiver available if a person has one conviction for possession of 30 grams or less of marijuana. But if they have two convictions for possession of marijuana, even if it was less than 2.5 grams, they're permanently disqualified from ever getting a visa. If the MORE Act passes, then that disqualification in immigration law would be removed. Therefore, more people would become eligible to apply for green cards who currently are not, simply because of a conviction for marijuana. So that one passed the House, and now it's on its way to the Senate. It attracted Republican votes, some Republican votes. So maybe we'll get a little bit on immigration this legislative session. And with that, Sara, I will turn it back over to you.
Wonderful, Sara. Thank you so much. You're always so, oh, look at her. She even she even has her mug. So so thank you so much for updating us. There's been so much in the news, and you keep up with all of those things, and sometimes we miss some of those. But I know that DACA has been Senator Durbin's kind of baby for a very long time. And now let's move to our second panelist, Ben Mueller. And Ben is the executive director, got to turn my page here, the executive director of Immigrants Services of Champaign-Urbana. And I understand that Ben is a super busy guy who works tirelessly for new arrivals in the Champaign area. So we're so excited that he has made time to be with us this evening, and he has a few things that he would like to say, and then we'll go on to Laura, and then we will open up for questions. So Ben, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that generous introduction. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm here among some friends. You know, I have to give a shout out to Marcy, who I think before this started mentioned that the fact that we've worked together for 5 years. Marcy's been indefatigable volunteer, helping us with our Facebook posts, and she's just an energizer bunny if I've ever known one. Just always there, providing help to us and ideas and getting things done. That's what I would mostly characterize Marcy as, a real doer. And then I saw also that Tim Flavin was here. Tim is also a member of our board. Shout out to Tim for the great work he's been doing for so long with MIRASA in Arcola and Douglas County. He's a wonderful advocate for immigrants and has been for a long, long time, and a friend of mine as well, and someone that we very, very much value his involvement with our organization, and hope to be able to do more things in the future with Arcola, which is a great example of the types of communities that we're talking about tonight. So let me tell you a little bit about Immigrant Services, the Champaign-Urbana, where everybody's like creating their short names. So like there's the Refugee Center, there's the Immigration Project. So we're probably going to drop the Champaign-Urbana, just call ourselves Immigrant Services, because we do a lot. We don't just do services, we do advocacy and of course education, but we are very much a service organization. Let me just spend a few minutes about talking about our organization, and then some of the things that we've been doing lately. And then I just want to point out some things that probably are already obvious about why rural communities should welcome refugees. And some of them have already been said, but I want to emphasize just a few things. So our organization, which originally was called CU FAIR, Friends and Allies of Immigrants and Refugees, began in 2016, really in response to the refugee crisis in Syria. And it was primarily focusing on this. It was an informal organization. We would meet in different churches and the mosque and talk about, the problems of the Syrian refugees and what we might be able to do to help them. I think, and then Donald Trump was elected. And of course, that was a pivot point where a lot more people got involved, because they got very, very concerned about having a president like about Trump, like Trump, and well that they should have been, and we continue to be worried by his presence in our political landscape. So we shifted to, especially with the increasing problems of the triangle of countries in Central America, and really all the people at our borders, southern border, we became to be much more involved with the immigrant populations, and not just with the people coming in from Central America. I will add that the Guatemalan magnet is huge in Champaign-Urbana. We are now the 25th largest populations of Guatemalans in the 7-state region of the Guatemalan Chicago Consulate. So it's a very, very fast-growing population, and the poorest population and the least educated population that we have seen in a long, long time. They have a world of problems. But we also work quite a bit with countries in Africa. Many of them are on the so-called lottery visa and have come to our country, but not everybody in their family is able to come on that visa. And so there's some that are, as Sara was describing, not documented, some that do have documentation, but they have many problems because they really don't have a lot of assistance as they're just arriving here with their, this very, very few resources and very little available for them when they get here. And then, of course, there are the refugees that we've been working with from the very beginning. Our largest population of refugees here in our area are from Afghanistan, and there are some from the Mideast, but the Afghanis continue, of course. The Afghanis.
We have I think someone needs to mute their. Let me go through and see if I can mute. There we go.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Okay. So, we've seen a recent influx, as you know, with the takeover of the Taliban of the government, and we continue to support, along with other organizations, primarily the Refugee Center, this population. I'm sure that before long there will be some Ukrainians that are coming here. There are a number of Ukrainians now at our southern border that have somehow found a way to the border with Mexico and are seeking asylum from there. One group we don't talk about as much that really needs a lot of attention are the unaccompanied minors. There are just many more than you can imagine here in Champaign-Urbana. There is a program here, the Cunningham Children's Home, that's been around since 1895, and they've gotten support from a United Methodist organization. It's a little known fact that 88% of the unaccompanied minors, when they arrive at the border, despite what you hear in the press and the right-wing media, 88% of the unaccompanied minors, they have a place to go in the United States. They have a relative or a friend that has qualified to receive them. And so the Cunningham Children's Home have been processing and helping these, they're only there for 30 days in most cases, but they're helping these young people get established and find their connections and do the legal work that they need and get to the places across America where they are going to find a home. But there are a lot of unaccompanied minors in the school systems as well that are not in that type of a program. And it's amazing, but there's some unaccompanied minors that are, 6, 7 years old. So living in very crowded trailers. There's a lot of things that are, I try not to become radicalized, but I kind of agree with what Sara said. It's getting more and more frustrating to try to figure out how things are going to be. There's going to be a future for all these people, but they are a part of America, and we need to continue to work together to make that happen. So let me just give you a thumbnail sketch about immigrant services, and then I just close my comments with some points I'd like to make about rural communities. Just to give you an idea about us, over the last, since really the onset of the pandemic, we have really emphasized food insecurity. We've delivered 12,000 sacks of food to over 400 families, and we continue to have emergency food assistance because families still need it. It's not as much as it was during the height of the pandemic, but it's a problem. Food insecurity is a big problem in Illinois, and it's a bigger problem in Champaign. We've helped to pay rent and utilities for over 200 families facing economic hardships. We have a fund called the Immigrant Emergency Assistance Fund that's dispersed. This is a fund with partner organizations, and I'm always trying to promote other organizations to donate to this because this isn't our general funds. These are partner funds, and we've done over 40,000 in the last 2 years, and that's just a separate fund that's not included in these 200 families that we're talking about, where we've helped them with rent and utilities. We've provided assistance to over 600 families who tested positive for COVID-19 with food, medications, and financial assistance and access to community resources. We've organized free mobile vaccine clinics for hundreds of immigrants and refugees. The most recent was April 2nd. We had a wonderful turnout at CUPHD where there was a vaccine clinic, but there were food trucks and ice cream, and there was raffles, and there was 13 organizations providing information in French, Spanish, and English for the Afghanis, lots of other things. But we're very big on doing things directly in the community and doing the large outreach events. We've helped register immigrant children in school and connected their parents to ESL classes. We've got one starting in Stone Creek Church just in about a week or so that we're very enthusiastic about. We've helped immigrants with pro bono legal assistance. I'll be talking to Sara after this with low bono and pro bono. We are connected across with Kent Law School, with a law professor there and a number of others around that are helping out with the asylum cases. We've provided transportation to immigrant court appearances, USCIS and ICE appointments, and with local transportation. That's a big need, and we have a good team of transportation. We have two 14 passenger vans from Stone Creek and First Presbyterian that help transport those nearly 240 persons, not all of them, but we had that many people at that April 2nd event. And then we provide our warehouse. We have free household furnishings and clothes and items for babies and toddlers for hundreds of families from our ISCU warehouse. So the tough things I think that people need, immigrants need, they have the access of the warehouse and the transportation, these other things I've mentioned. So in closing, I just wanted to say that we know that in rural communities, as it's already been mentioned, these populations are declining. As Sara mentioned with more detail, that affects especially the school systems. They can lose their schools if the immigrants, when they come to a community, we know they have high fertility rates. They're going to have lots of children, and they're going to really help those school systems to stay in the communities. There are really a number of jobs out in rural communities that can't be filled right now. We know examples of in Arcola, where they have reached out to us, several companies. They need people, and they're starting to work actively to recruit, particularly Afghani refugees, to become part of their communities because they need people that can work hard and they can depend on. So those jobs and keeping those companies in the community are important for the livelihood of their economies. The obvious thing is diversity is a great thing. They enrich the cultural and social and economic conditions of these small towns, having immigrants there. And, there's great examples of when they've been there for a while, how they strengthen local government. You've got the example of Onarga that now has a mayor who's Mexican, from Mexican background, the police force, a number of areas where the immigrants, when they come to the community, they strengthen across the board. The institutions help the population. The flight of the sons and daughters of rural residents are leaving those communities. They need good young people and to come in and give them leadership in the future. And they're doing all those things. They need to be given this opportunity. And believe me, the best way to convince other rural communities is talk to leadership in towns like Arcola and Arnarga about the success stories of what immigrants have made a difference in their community. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ben. I can see you are busy. You have a lot going on, and all of us have some strong passion here. And I'm thrilled now to introduce my friend Laura. I met Laura Moreno, who is the literacy coordinator at Sauk Valley Community College. I met her when I was a volunteer English as a second language tutor at Sauk. So Laura is not only the glue between volunteers like me, volunteer instructors, and new English speakers who need help with learning English, but she is a role model herself for what it means to come to a new community and then turn around and give back to those who have helped her. So Laura, we're going to turn the screen over to you and let you tell your story. So anxious to hear from you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for the invitation to share my story. So I am from Mexico, from Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua. So it is the state that is in the north of Mexico, border with El Paso, Texas. So I was born there, I was raised there. And then the way how I ended up coming here to Sterling, Illinois, a rural area, is my sister, my older sister, was diagnosed with cancer in Mexico, with leukemia. So she ended up moving here from Ciudad Juarez as well, moving to Sterling to get her leukemia treatment. So when she moved here, I was 13 years old. So a few years after that, I started coming here to visit just when I was on my vacation from school. So, she was here, and then I was living in Mexico with my grandmother who raised me. So I was attending school there. And then when I was in college, in 2010, the situation in Ciudad Juarez started getting really bad with violence, with the cartel problems, and all those main things that happen, mainly in the border. So just that year, which is when I moved here in 2010, there were a little over 3,000 people killed in the city. So it was a really bad situation. Just, even in your own house, you were not safe. Going out to school, like just in, any part of the city, it was very unsafe. So my grandmother wanted to move here. She's wanted to have a peaceful area, and she also needed to live here because she was a permanent resident. So we ended up moving to Sterling that year in 2010. I was 19 years old at that time. So as I said, I was attending college at that time. I was in the third semester of my international business cover year. So, I had to stop school there. We moved here to Sterling, and I get here speaking no English, and I was like, okay, if I want to continue working on my goal of finishing a degree, I will have to start working on my English. There is no other way. I can continue working on all the goals. So I, started asking where can I start learning English? Where can I get this? So just like new to the area, of course, having my sister living here for a few years, that helped a lot. But in general, the community was very welcoming, always leading me to the right places for any questions that I had, for, let's say, medical assistance that I needed, for the classes especially. So, and then of course my English teacher ended up being a great help for many of the things that I did. So I started attending the ESL classes that Sauk Valley Community College offered. And then the teacher later encouraged me to go and get the JD. And so I, around 2 years later, in 2012, I got my GED, and my English had improved so much that I felt that I could start college then. So in 2012, I signed up for classes at Sauk Valley Community College. So I got my associates in science there 3 years later in 2015, and then transferred to Western Illinois University in Moline, where I got my bachelor's in human resources. So before I graduated, when I was attending the classes at Sauk Valley Community College, I heard about the program where I work now, about the literacy program. So I was a student there, and one of the people who worked in that department went to a club that I was in, and they said, we are looking for volunteers to go and help in the ESL classes. I was like, okay, those are the classes that I attended, where I went to learn English, so I may be able to help here. So at that time, I went through the training to become a volunteer tutor, and I went to the ESL classes to help the students who were in the situation that I was a few years before that, learning English. So I was like, I may be able to give back here. Give back to the community that helped me a lot. So I was able to do that for almost a year until as I said, I transferred to Western. So I got a little busier. I started working as a secretary at the Lee County Health Department. That was my very first job. So then when I graduated from Western, I saw the opportunity to work at the college in the same department, where I had started as a student. For this position that I have now, the adult literacy coordinator. So then I moved from the Lee County Health Department to the college, and I have been there for almost 5 years now. So what I do is what Sara said. So I partner students who have a low reading level, which is usually from 9th grade or lower. And then, it can be someone who is learning English as their second language, or it can be a native speaker who just needs to improve their reading level. So we recruit the volunteer tutors, we train them, and then, we partner them so the tutors can help the students to improve their reading level, so they can achieve their goals. It can be, they may want to go and get their GED, they may want to improve their English just to be able to help their kids with homework, just many goals that the students have. So they are able to get this help with the program. So in general, I'm just, very thankful with all the help that I always got here in this area, all the opportunities that I have had to give back to the community that helped me.
Thank you so much, Laura. And can you imagine being a new arrival, or someone who is embarrassed because they now would like to learn how to read better? And who do you encounter when you go to Sauk but someone as lovely as Laura? And I know that she is such an addition to our community, and she's just such a lovely person. So we thank you so much for sharing your personal story. Thank you so much. So I think we have some questions, and we're going to be able to go to the questions section of our event. Marcy, who has our first question?
Well, actually, the first person is not so much a question, but I really want him to say what he posted in the chat a bit ago about healthcare, because Moses Kyobe, who actually is an MD, he put something in the chat about healthcare, and actually I think that is more interesting, spurring on discussion among the panelists than some questions are. Moses, can you mention what you put in the chat?
Yeah, thank you very much. Great panel. And I think immigrants are the gem that rural communities don't appreciate. They're the gem, because as I put in my comments, among the 8 cardiologists in Swedish American Hospital, 6 of us are immigrants. So we are definitely helping the rural communities in even supplying the basic needs, human needs for the country. So immigration is really a gem that people need to understand and not fear, because we bring something to the nation. We don't take away, we always add to the nation. I had a question for Sara. I don't know whether I can ask that in the same.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been watching the trends, and thank you, Sara Dady, for being around. And we need you back to run again if you can, please. We shall be there. But we've been watching the trends, and I see that amongst what is proposed in the bills before Congress, they're going to help the immigrants. But I see a trend mainly in the Hispanic voting bloc, whereby there's a trend towards the Republican Party. Is there something that we're not articulating to the immigrants or to that community that would help? Because you look at states like Florida and Texas, they're really trending red. And when you look at the numbers after the polls have closed, it's been a big shift towards the Republican Party from the Hispanic community. So what are we missing here?
Thanks, Dr. Coyote, and thanks for your support in 2018. I really appreciate it. And it's funny.
Hope you come back. Hope you come back.
Well, let me tell you, when they did the redistricting in Rockford, they scooped out my neighborhood and left it in the 16th, my specific neighborhood. Everyone else is in the 17th.
I thought you were in the 17th.
No, I'm still in the 16th, Sarah. I'm still.
We're going to be
in the 17th.
So,
so we have Dr. Coyote's question.
Yes. We need to understand that Latinos don't vote as a bloc. Just like white people don't vote as a bloc. Latinos are like white people. They do not vote as a bloc. And there is a large number of Latinos in this country who are very conservative. And they find what I would call the classical Republican messaging, free trade, business, private school, cutting taxes, so you have more money to pay for your kids' private school. They're really attracted to that. And then even within the Latino community, among immigrants who second or third generation immigrants, it depends on the country they're from, right? So you look at Florida, the majority of the Latino population is Cuban. Cubans have been Republicans for a very long time because they hate communists. And Republican messaging that Democrats are communists is very successful with them. And then you look at Venezuelans, and we have a large population of Venezuelans in this country who are naturalized citizens. Democrats are socialists. They hate socialists. That's how, who destroyed their country and why they had to flee. So messaging to those particular Latino immigrant groups, for Republicans, it works, but it will be a huge mistake for Democrats to ever assume that Latinos will vote Democrat because of immigration. It's simply not true. And we cannot fall into that trap. Then you have Latinos who absolutely will vote Democrat because, we're trying to deport their mother. They're not going to vote Republican. They're not going to vote for a Trump. But then if they're young, we face the same problem with getting young people to vote. If all millennials and Gen Z, if they all voted, they outnumber boomers. But we have to get them to vote. And younger people tend to be more liberal. And that's also why we need them to vote. But in a nutshell, Latinos don't vote as a bloc. It'll be a huge mistake to assume that they do.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, and if Ben and Laura want to chime in on this, that would be awesome too. And if you don't feel like you need to, that's great. Sarah, you rock, by the way.
Ben, did you have a comment there, or Laura?
Well, Laura, you can go if you want to say something. Go right ahead.
You can go ahead, that's fine.
Okay, well, I think that Sara made some very good points. I do think that Florida, I think is trending, and it's very difficult to turn around Florida. I think that, you know, you have just a number, you know, that you have the very conservative Cubans that make up a large population. But I think in Texas, there's hope. I think in Texas, there's work to be done organizing, but there's some good leaders there, and the border towns, and in general, the large populations in places like Houston, you know, that's why they're trying to restrict the voting. The Republicans are doing such a job on trying to restricting how people can vote and mail-in ballots and all those kind of voting boxes and all that. They're working very hard to restrict the vote. That's because I think there is a decent coalition of minority, including Hispanics in Texas, that could make a difference. But I'm not sure when that will happen, but I'm more hopeful about Texas than I am with Florida. But I agree everything what Sara said. You can't look at one size does not fit all. The Latino population is very diverse in their needs and their ways of being influenced in order to vote are quite distinct.
Thank you. Laura, did you want to say anything, or shall we go on to the next question? You're okay? Okay. I'm going to take the floor and ask the next question. And this is for all three of you. I'm wondering if you could shed some light, just your opinion on why you think more new arrivals do not end up in rural parts of the country, particularly in rural Illinois. What is blocking people from choosing to come to a rural area? Many immigrants have left a rural area, but then when they come here, they come to the large cities. But housing is more affordable in a rural area. You might, in some cases, it might be safer. What's blocking people from choosing to come to a rural area? What would you say? And any one of the three of you could start that one.
I can start.
Sara. Okay.
I'm sure Ben can add to this. People go where they have support, where they already have a network, where they have a family member, where they have a friend. And that's typically in an urban area. But I promise you, all you need is one immigrant family to settle in a rural area, and others will follow. Their network will follow them. So you really, basic rule of thumb, one family.
Okay. Like Laura's sister. Laura, do you agree with that?
Yes, because, you know, not only, so it was my sister, and then later my grandma and I moved here, my mom and my little brother. So yes, yes, that is correct.
So here is Laura is the example, right?
And here's the opposite example. You know, when refugees are processed outside the United States, they're found to have a fear of persecution. And so then once they're approved for refugee status, we resettle them in the US. And there are different agencies that help with the resettlement. Here in Rockford, about 20 years ago, Somalis started coming over as refugees. And we received a few in the Rockford area, but they were here for like 2 weeks and then they left. They went up to the Twin Cities where they had friends and family, and there's already an established huge Somali population.
Mm-hmm. The same thing happened here years ago with the Hmong population. They came here, they began their lives here, but then they moved to the Minneapolis, Minnesota area. Ben, did you have a comment about why people don't end up in rural areas more often?
Well, I think, you know, I would have to agree with the last thing that Sara said. You just need one, you know, and a great example of that well over, I'm not exactly sure, it's somewhere between 10 and more than 10 years ago, there was an Afghan family that came to Champaign-Urbana. You know, I've got to say, when we have this discussion, we ought to look at rural areas and small cities, because they're small cities like Champaign-Urbana. You know, you take away the student population that's there, you know, 40,000 plus people, they're still kind of small cities, you know, Urbana especially much smaller. And you've got huge disparities in those cities. The census tract, if you really looked at neighborhoods in Urbana and Champaign, there's some very, very poor people that are a number of them are immigrants that live there. But the zip code of Champaign-Urbana doesn't show up as being a particularly poor place. So there's not a lot of attraction of funds to that because of lack of qualifications. But anyway, back to my point, this one Afghani family came, kind of the end of the story. He just recently moved to Chicago because he found a better job, but he's been here well over 10 years. And then before all of this business of the, you know, the different organizations that were sponsoring refugees and the, you know, the different efforts of larger groups supported by the State Department with funds. Before all of that, it just was that somebody that lived in a place sponsored a family, said, yes, we know this family and we will give them shelter and help them get started. And so that's how it's grown and will continue to grow. And so I think that's something to bear in mind. I don't know what the solution is to get that kind of thing started in rural communities, other than the fact that I will say, and I, you know, Tim knows probably a little bit more about this than I do, Tim Flavin. There are organizations now in rural communities, for example, in Arcola, that are making a concerted effort to provide the kinds of network support that you would find in places like Champaign-Urbana. And they're starting, and they are making this effort to help with transportation and housing and finding jobs. And so when you have these small organizations working in rural communities, that's the beginning of a support network. And I think that's important, that we continue to try to support those organizations and however we can, so that they can be successful in planting the seeds in these smaller communities.
Great. Laura, could you talk about just how I think we have a new Afghani family here in the area that you're helping. You've gotten a tutor for them. How did they end up here? I think they're our newest, right?
Yeah, so it's something you know, similar as what Ben just mentioned. They have a person that is sponsoring, so they have you know, family that is sponsoring them. So that's how they got our, you know, their immigration process and all that. So they came here, how they call it, asylum. They got their asylum. So this person, before they got here, their sponsor contacted me, and you know, she said, okay, so I have a couple who will be coming to the US with their kids. She was like, we're not sure when yet, but you know, it might be soon. So they may need tutoring because they need to, you know, they already knew some English, but they need to improve it. So this person who was their sponsor also knew one of our tutors, so that worked. That, you know, the tutor was able to take the two students that, yeah, from Afghanistan. So they got here not maybe like a month or two after she contacted me. So she took them to the office. We had them take the reading test to make sure that they qualified, having a reading level below 9th grade. So they did, and then they started meeting with their tutor. So right now, you know, so that's how they got here. Now their sponsor is helping them to find a job, and just, you know, get their connections around the community. But yeah, so that's I would say the main thing with your, you know, someone that you know, your sponsor, or, you know, any connection that you have in the rural area.
Right. Thank you, Laura. Okay, Marcy, do we have another question?
Yeah, the next one was from Natalie Andrews, specifically for Laura. Natalie? Natalie?
Natalie, you'll have to come off mute. And Natalie is my good friend, so let's see.
I see the
There's-
question.
Okay, so we can just go ahead and read it for you.
Yes.
What was your experience of the process of entering the US in 2010? So how did
Okay.
you go about coming in?
So to me, it was not that complicated. So when I was a minor, my grandmother had processed a visitor visa for me. So those are given to you for 10 years. So that's how I would come and visit. And that's the visa that I used to come here as a visitor. So you're allowed to come here for at least 6 months with that type of visa. You can go back to your country and renew it if you want to, still, stay a little longer. So that's how I ended up entering the country. And later when I got married, my husband was a citizen. So that's how I became a permanent resident and then later a citizen.
Laura, have you done your citizenship?
Yes.
Oh, everybody give Laura a hand. Wow.
Congratulations, you rock.
Thank you.
Congratulations. That is great. Thank you. I didn't realize that you had done that.
Yeah,
And
it was 3 years ago.
Wonderful. I'm a little out of date. And I want to acknowledge Natalie, who just asked that question. Natalie and her partner, Margaret, went down during the border crisis and volunteered and helped at the Mexican-American border, the border of Mexico and the United States I think in Texas, and helped out, I think 2 years ago or so when the crisis was. When is there not a crisis there? But
it's a manufactured crisis. It's manufactured.
Okay.
There's Customs and Border Protection. Most Americans, we don't have no idea how our government works. We have no idea. Customs and Border Protection is one of the largest federal agencies in the United States. CBP processes over 1 million people per day at our ports of entry. And if you are telling me that Customs and Border Protection is overwhelmed by an extra 20,000 people per day, that is a problem of CBP management, mismanagement. We process billions of goods, inspect millions of vehicles every day at our borders. There's absolutely no reason why we can't process an extra 20,000 people per day. And every single one of those Central Americans should be paroled in, just like we did with the Afghans and like we are doing now with the Ukrainians. We're not keeping them out under Title 42. We're paroling in white Europeans who are fleeing violence in their home countries, and we only keep out Black and brown people. This is a manufactured crisis, and it's one that the Republican parties run hard on every year by telling people to be afraid of Black and brown people.
Yeah, and let me just say, double down on what's being said. And it is a problem that the Customs and Border Patrol, not everywhere, but plenty of examples, and our detention centers in places like Richland in Louisiana. We've been working with an inmate there that's been jailed over 2 years. We found some help for him with the pro bono out of New Orleans. You know what he was given for Christmas dinner? Beans with worms in it. That's how these people are being treated. And at the Customs and Border Patrol, the reason that these people are not getting across the border is because those people, they should clean house. They need, the police reform is not limited to the police in our cities. The reform that needs to happen with many of our police forces needs to happen at the border. Those people have not been trained properly. They've been in there too long. They're prejudiced and they discriminate against Black and brown people. And that is a fact.
And by the way, Customs and Border Protection is also the most corrupt federal agency in our government.
tremendously.
You just
corrupt.
have to look at the statistics of the number of border and protection agents who have been convicted of crimes.
Oh, absolutely.
And Republicans consistently work to lower the hiring and screening standards for CBP agents.
Wow. Wow.
So every time a Republican talks about border security, we need to talk about corruption, and we need to talk about informed choices to treat Black and brown people differently than white Europeans and Asians. I've already got a bunch of Afghan pro bono cases, by the way.
I'm sure.
But let me show you the stark difference. So we've got all these unaccompanied minors because parents in Central America want to keep their children safe, right? So they've been sending them to our border because they're fleeing corruption and disintegration and natural disasters. So those children come to the border, we immediately put them in deportation proceedings. So they're scheduled for an immigration court date. Maybe they get a lawyer. It depends if they're pro bono lawyers available, because there's no right to a free lawyer in immigration court. There's no public defender's office because it's civil law. So these brown children are immediately put in deportation proceedings. Afghan children are paroled in and they can apply for asylum at their leisure.
That's right.
They're not in deportation proceedings. We treat brown children at our border. We put them on the fast track to deportation just because they are brown children from Central America.
Or they're sent to these terrible Mexican cities where they're victimized by the cartels, raped, killed. Yeah. You know, there's a lot to be pissed off about.
And those children are also raped in our own immigration detention centers because there's no accountability with these private contractors and ICE officers. That's also a huge problem in our own United States immigration detention centers.
Yeah, let's not get, but we had a University of Illinois professor from UI of Springfield that gave a presentation that I actually recruited, and she had some horror stories of a particular area where there was so many bad instances. You know, this is the thing, the Democrats, if they want to get reelected, they got to get up and be fighters and talk about the terrible things that have to be changed in this country. And like it or not, those are the realities. And if you want to get young people to vote and you want to get minorities to vote, you've got to stand up and start talking, speaking, what's the saying? Speaking the truth. I forget the saying, but there's a lot to talk about.
Speak truth to power.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, we just heard from Laura, who left Ciudad Juarez because of the danger there. I mean, and fortunately, she left before the Trump administration came into power. And who knows? In any case, we're glad you're here, Laura. All right, Marcy, next question.
Yeah. Now, actually, some of this conversation kind of dovetails into something Jessica Motzinger, Jessica didn't have a question, but she had a comment that kind of connects with all this. So I'd like her to mention what she said in the chat. Jessica, can you do that?
Sure. In regards to Texas?
Yeah, and your your disabled aunt and, you know, all that stuff. Yes.
Oh, yes. I have family. I have a disabled auntie in San Antonio on the east side. And since she's disabled now, she lives in Section 8 housing. And it took her almost 2 years to get a driver's license. She had a driver's license from Arizona, lived in Texas. However, as a Black woman, she had like stories like we hear everywhere else. That 2 years they had to prove that she was divorced, had a right to change her name, that a dead husband was actually dead. And she had to come up with all these documents. It's the voter suppression laws that they're passing. At some point, they do work. And no matter how much you organize, they're still there. We need to really get some protective legislation out. And honestly, I think it would help across the board. But Texas they wrote out Representative Sheila Jackson Lee's district now, like Ohio did with Kucinich back in 2004 back then. They did the same thing. So there's no more Black majority representative congressional district in Texas anymore. So it's yeah, that's what I was saying. Sorry.
Thank you, Jessica. And you can see Jessica is promoting her. She's working on the Poor People's Campaign, and she's going to be going to Washington, D.C. on June 18th. And she invites anybody who would like to go with her to go with her.
She's going to make an announcement about that at the end.
Okay.
At 8:50, we're going to stop so we can have announcements. And Jessica has stuff also. Also, when you do that, Jessica, you can also mention about the stuff that Metro East is doing too. So. Anyway, the next person is Phil Vela had a question. Vela?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Phil.
Hello.
Phil.
Okay, I can hear you now. There's a concept that, I mean, when I was a young boy, people came to this country to Ellis Island and what have you. And there was a concept that if you go to a rural area, you're probably not going to get a job because the factories and things were in cities. And are we still living under that concept? And maybe that's why people aren't moving to rural areas.
Who would like to fill that one? Thank you, Phil.
Well, I only say this, that's, and one size doesn't fit all with rural communities, but there are plenty of rural communities in Illinois that are looking for workers for good paying jobs. And it's not easy for immigrants and refugees to be able to make that transition away from their safety net. But there are rural communities that don't have openings and work, but there are plenty of them. That I think that is something that's changing. And that's across the board of this nationwide problem that we have, everywhere, whether it's the supply chain or all the other factors that have entered into it. There's definitely a shortage of workers, and there are decent paying jobs and opportunities with benefits for those, that when an asylum seeker comes to this country, they need to have. They don't have to necessarily immediately, and Sara may correct me on this one, but they need to have somebody that can help them fill out their 589 and get that to immigration court. And once that's been done, that's just a process for explaining why they're applying for asylum. Way before their court hearing is ever brought up, then they're eligible to apply for their work certification. And once they get their work certification and social security number, that's only limited on how it can be used, not for social security benefits, but to prove for employment, then they are eligible to do the kind of work that is available in the community. So you really have to help asylum seekers, be able to do that. And there is a lawsuit now, if Sara would comment on this, for all those, because there's really only 1 year once you're in the country that you have to claim for asylum. But there is a lawsuit that says for a number of circumstances that Sara sure knows more about than I, that is a collective lawsuit, challenging the 1 year rule. And so it's really important. That closes on April 22nd. So if there are immigrants in your community that haven't know about that and have put in their 589 or can get it together, they should be part of that suit. I don't know if Sara wants to comment on that at all. I'm sure she knows more about it than I do.
Yeah, the 589 is the asylum application. So again, I mentioned refugees are processed outside of the US. They file their applications saying they're going to be persecuted, they're interviewed, they have their background checks. So when they come in, they already come in as refugees. Their application has already been approved before they ever arrive in the US. But then you have people that don't have access to refugee processing, like Central Americans, because the UN hasn't set up refugee processing, and the United States doesn't recognize Central Americans as refugees. So they can't walk to a US embassy abroad and apply for asylum. Unlike CBP thinks. CBP went on the news. There's a spokesman for their union went on CNN last Sunday and claimed that all the people at our border should just apply for asylum at the closest US embassy. They can't do it. It's not allowed. There's no process for that. So to apply for asylum in the US, you have to come into the United States or present yourself at a port of entry. The law says if you present yourself at a port of entry and express a fear of being sent back to your home country, you get a quick little interview. If they think you're credible, they put you in deportation proceedings, so then you can make your application to the immigration judge. That's the way that it works. Or the law says it doesn't matter if they come in illegally, if they swim across the Rio Grande, they step foot on US soil, find a Customs and Border Protection agent, say, hey, I want to apply for asylum. That's perfectly legal. It's absolutely fine. And they have to be allowed to do that, except for Title 42, allowed CBP to refuse any applications for asylum, any processing from brown people at our border.
And that's based on the pandemic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Supposedly. But for asylum claims, you have to file your asylum application within 1 year of your arrival in the US. Unfortunately, CBP was not advising people of this, so they were releasing them to wait for their first court date, and their court date was often 2 years after their arrival, their first one. So they couldn't file their asylum applications. They had no way to file them. So class action is arguing that that should not, 1 year deadline should not apply, particularly when the government doesn't advise people of the deadline.
And that's the class action suit I was referring to. Isn't the deadline for that, that you have to be a part of that suit by April 21st?
Yeah, but keep in mind too, a lot of people aren't even going to qualify for asylum. That's the other misconception. Asylum isn't for people running away from generalized violence. Asylum is very complex and very specific.
It is.
Asylum only means that you fall into some category, like you're a political dissident, or you're persecuted because of religious or racial grounds. Like, if the Holocaust was happening today, European Jews would qualify under asylum, but if you're just running from a poor country, that's not grounds for asylum, correct?
Right.
Yeah,
and if you were threatened by a gang saying, hey, you got to join our gang or we're going to kill you, that's not grounds for asylum.
No, but there are plenty of people. It's true. It's unfortunate, but there's plenty of people who we know about that not only have been threatened, but their dad has been murdered. One of the members of their family, including a mother and a daughter, have been raped in the countryside. There are police reports. There are things that can be verified, and that's different than just running from a threat. This is actual things that have happened to the families that if they return.
But it's the ultimate loophole, because if you just live in a very violent society, but you're not being persecuted because you're a member of an ethnic minority, then you don't qualify for asylum, even if you can document that you're the victim of extreme violence. So it's
and let's not forget, under the Trump administration, when he appointed a bunch of new Board of Immigration Appeal judges, all of a sudden having a family member who was murdered by a gang was not grounds for another surviving family member's asylum case. Right. That decision has been reversed. As well as women who are victims of domestic violence who cannot leave their abusers.
Right.
That could be grounds now. But asylum, even if someone applies for asylum, in fact, the majority of people at our border, they're not going to qualify. Their asylum applications are never going to be approved, and they will lose and they will be ordered deported. But what we could do, if we had the courage to do it, is we could parole all of these people in, give them work permits.
David, using the term parole, what does parole mean in this context?
Okay, parole is an power given to the executive branch by Congress that allows the executive branch to say, which is CBP and the president, Department of Homeland Security, okay, we're going to allow you to come in for 1 year, 2 years. We're going to give you permission to be in the United States. You can get a work permit. And then at the end of that time, either we're going to put you in deportation proceedings, or we will renew your parole again. Or if you have found some other way to apply for legal status in the US, you can do that instead. It's exactly what we're doing with the Afghans. We are paroling them in. The Afghans that are showing up at our southern border who have made their way here, we're paroling them in. The Ukrainians, we're paroling them in. It's exactly what we did with the Cubans. And the Cubans got their own special law that says after they've been here for 1 year, they can apply for green cards. They don't need anybody to sponsor them.
That's a political thing, obviously. I mean,
yeah, but what Biden could do is he could direct CBP to parole all these people in. And then Republicans are going to freak out saying, oh, you're letting in criminals. Well, they're not saying that about Afghans. They're not saying that about Ukrainians. It's a humanitarian thing to do. And it's not like CBP doesn't, process these people. They get fingerprinted. They get sat down, they get asked questions, they have to fill out forms. And then they get ID'd and they get issued identification so we know who they are and there are requirements they have to follow. We have a worker shortage in this country, especially in rural America. The majority of farm workers in this country are undocumented. And they're working. And if there's a job in a small town and that employer is going to hire them without asking any questions, which all these farmers do, they'll go there. They'll go and take those jobs. They do. I can't tell you the number of times I've had a white farmer sitting in one chair in my office and his undocumented worker who's been working for him for 10 years. And this white farmer says, well, I'm here to vouch for my worker, Jose. He's the best worker I ever had, and I'm vouching for him to get his papers. That's not how our law works. You can't just vouch for the people you like. And in fact, your best worker, Jose, can't get a green card. He can't get legal status. You can't even apply for a worker visa for him because now he's been unlawfully present in the United States.
Right. And the irony, of course, is that the biggest immigration reform in this country was under Ronald Reagan, a Republican president in 1986. And now the party has gone so off the rails, they could never do anything even remotely like that today.
Well, the party was the Democrats were off the rails on immigration for a long time. Clinton signed the worst law we've ever had. Reagan was the best president on immigration. He sucked on everything else, but he was the last best president on immigration. But keep in mind, Democrats now are coming around on it. They used to be the obstacle. But now it's the Republicans who are the obstacle. Darren LaHood voted against the ag worker bill that just passed the House. He voted no on that. His entire district is rural. The Farm Bureau supports comprehensive immigration reform like this ag worker bill. The Chamber of Commerce supports it. Your mainstream, old school, classical Republicans all support comprehensive immigration reform. Unfortunately, there are 3 organizations that have the ear of Congressman, and I will call out our student journalist, Eunice, right? Mm-hmm. There are 3 organizations that have been identified by the Southern Poverty Law Center as nativist hate groups. Those organizations are Numbers USA, FAIR, which ironic, but most insidious is Center for Immigration Studies, CIS. For whatever reason, these 3 organizations have taken their anti-immigrant racist rhetoric mainstream. That's why all you ever hear about is border security, criminals, disease, immigrants bring disease. These are the same anti-immigrant tropes that we've had since the founding of this nation. So when news organizations go for an opposing point of view on immigration, they go to one of these 3 organizations. But that's like going to the KKK for an opposing point of view on civil rights.
That's right.
So anytime you see any one of these organizations quoted in the media, you need to call that media outlet and ask them why they're going to an identified nativist hate group for an opposing point of view, which is not legitimate. But these three organizations control Republican fundraising on immigration issues.
Wow. I told you. Did I tell you that Sara would educate us all? She is a teacher extraordinaire, and what a thrill it is to count her as a friend. And we're going to wind things up because we do have some announcements that we want to let people have an opportunity to make. But wow, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And I have learned so much. And Sara, we thank you. Ben, we thank you. Laura, we thank you. This has just been fabulous. I think everybody on the call can say that they're ending tonight knowing a whole lot more than we knew at 7:30. So I thank you so very much. And I know Marcy does too. So thank you for being on our rural call tonight. And if you'd like to hang tight and see some of the things that are coming up, we'll have some announcements for the next 5 minutes or so. And then we will say good night. And oh my, Sara, now that I know that you're in the 16th, are we going to let Darren LaHood be our congressperson? Oh,
Well, who's got $1 million for the campaign fund?
Yeah, that's the issue. That's the issue. I know.
Okay. So let's we
let's
got to
get to announcements.
get to announcements. We're going to start with Jessica. Go ahead, Jessica.
Hey, can I go ahead and share my screen real quick?
Sure.
Oh,
yeah, let me get you.
No, it's disabled, I guess. Okay.
No, well, she's gonna make you a co-host. Sara's gonna make you a co-host.
There you go. Now you can.
Thank you. All right. Let's share that real quick. All right. Go up here. All right. Hopefully y'all can see that. I am the statewide campaign organizer with Poor People's Campaign. And my whole job is to assist within the state of Illinois, the Poor People's Campaign, organize and mobilize different organizations, groups, activists, people, poor folk, low wage, rural, immigrant, refugee, everybody, mobilize everyone to get up and show out on June 18th. Poor People's Campaign, as many of y'all know, is a direct continuation of Martin Luther King Jr.'s War on Poverty. Because again, we have a moral problem in this country. Over 140 million poor folks and millions more are actually one paycheck away from disaster, homelessness, etc. And as we know, the pandemic's made everything worse. So there's so many issues. As many issues in the US and as we've been discussing, there are. So we need as many people as possible to help us support. So if I could ask each of you to ask your groups or anyone else to help us, whether it's to have an announcement or anything else with your group, or if you could sponsor a bus ticket, or if you could just donate whatever you can, whether it's 5, 10, whatever, everything helps. We need all of your assistance, and we thank you so very much. And as far as Indivisible Metro East goes, we actually on April 12th have the Thank You for Our Election Heroes event. We're going to thank all the people that keep our nation's system of democracy strong. And we hope that we're doing this along with other groups nationwide. Then on the 23rd, we will be down in East St. Louis, which is in the 13th district now. And I don't know if you can see over here, but I have over 300 seedlings that are started. And we are partnering with a nonprofit, one of our leaders in Indivisible Metro East. And we are starting back up their garden focused on sickle cell and poor kids community and get them involved in a healthier start, sustainability. And if this garden goes well, we'll be teaching them how to preserve food and everything else. So that's what we're doing. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, I guess it looks like I'm going to be the next one to talk about what's happening. Just an FYI, Indivisible Illinois and the Wisconsin Democratic Party have been collaborating on a Saturday phone bank from 4 to 5:30, and it's every Saturday. Although we're going to take a hiatus on the 16th because it's Passover weekend and Easter weekend. So we're going to take a hiatus then. But what we had been doing up until now is just calling voters in South Milwaukee, telling them to get their absentee ballots sent for, because they had a local election, and then also they could apply for their absentee ballots for the elections in the fall. Well, starting this Saturday, we're going to add Illinois. We are going to we are going to have links to call in a phone banks in Champaign County, also in the Illinois 14th, which is Lauren Underwood's campaign. And then also we will still be calling into Wisconsin. We will be calling voters who have been low propensity voters, asking them to get their vote by ballots. In Champaign County, we're going to be asking, anyone who's going to be calling into Champaign County phone bank will be calling strong Democrats, asking them to get their vote by mail ballots, and also asking if they wanted to be election judges. And then for Lauren Underwood's campaign in the Illinois 14th, they're going to be specifically asking about voting for Lauren Underwood and volunteering for her campaign. So that is this Saturday, 4 to 5:30, it'll be on Zoom. We're taking a hiatus on the 16th, and just to let you know, after that, when we come back on the 23rd, we will be having a special guest at the beginning of our phone bank, Ezra Levin, who is the co-chair and co-founder of Indivisible National. He and his wife co-founded it after the 2016 election. And Indivisible, and just for those of you who don't know, Indivisible National, there are about 6,000 individual chapters throughout the country, and Indivisible National started it. Ezra is going to be doing a pep talk at the beginning of the phone bank on the 23rd of April. So this link is just specifically for this phone bank coming up this week, but watch for the next time around. The other thing I want to let you know about is next week is going to for the statewide meeting. The Vote by Mail Task Force will be in charge of it, and we are going to talk about everything you wanted to know about vote by mail in Illinois. So and that's going to be from 7:30 to 9 next Wednesday night on Zoom, and I will put something in the chat for that. So. Now, I guess I don't think there's anyone from Social Justice. Is anyone? No, there's no one here from Social Justice Alliance, is there?
I'm here. This is Jim.
Oh, okay. Are you going to? Do you want to announce? Do you want to announce the IISJA meeting on Sunday? I mean Saturday. Do you want to make an announcement about that?
The one I want to announce is the disinformation at school boards, which is on the 16th, not this Saturday, but the next Saturday. We're going to have our meeting. I'll put the link in the chat. But what we're going to do is tell people how to find all these FOIA requests that people are making on their school districts, which are costing school districts money, wasting time. These things aren't easy to find, but every school district publishes them. And if you go through them, you will see it's the same people doing FOIA requests every week. So what we're going to encourage people to do is do this, get the names of these people. They may try to run for school board April next year. So we need to know this. And so we're trying to build that background knowledge. So let me put that in the chat. Sign up, join us on the 16th. There you go, in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Since no one is here about the Social Justice Alliance meeting this week, I'll just make an announcement about it. The Social Justice Alliance meets every Saturday. It's just that each Saturday of the month is designated to a different thing. Jim is the guru as far as school boards go. He and Joyce are awesome, and so they always are there for school boards. And so that's the next week. But this coming week, this coming Saturday, they're going to have Write Letters to Voters with Indivisible. Writing letters to voters with Indivisible and WSOFA and Vote Forward. And actually, I know somebody who is here at this meeting who always goes to that. And so she may be able to say something. Barbara Anderson, I know you've been doing the writing letters to voters things. Do you want to say something about it?
Well, I've been enjoying the Zoom group because Rose makes it very interesting, and all the people that she invites to speak are very interesting, and it is a pleasant way to do something good, and it's an easy way to do something good, and it is for a good reason.
Thank you. You rock. So I knew I could probably count on you, even though I put you on the spot. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay. I think that's everything. I really do want to thank Sara and Ben and Laura. And actually, I want to thank Sarah Bingham and Sara for being the moderator. I was going to give you a formal introduction, but you didn't let me.
I probably jumped in.
So anyway, but you guys really rocked. This was really an awesome panel. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you all for coming and attending this. You all rock.
Thank you. Good night, all. We really appreciate your being here. Take good care.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.